The best way to make children good is to make them happy. Oscar Wilde, English philosopher and writer. Young slaves, children all over the world are still compelled to work. Jeans, t-shirts and many other things are manufactured by children's hands. The Institute for Children's Ombudsman, Kazakhstan, will defend its young citizens. Human rights violations. About 250 million children need to work. This number can be increased due to a complex economic situation. As for agricultural labor, children usually work in the fields from the 5th grade. In this age, they can already perform physical works. Made by children's hands. About 170 million children work in the textile industry. This data was published by the International Labour Organization. Many young laborers have to work in bad conditions with a poor safety situation. As a rule, social package programs are not even mentioned. Salaries are often irregular and low. There is no doubt that the worst forms of children's labor exist in all countries around the world. Children are exploited everywhere. Often they work as carriers and move very heavy things. The cotton scandal. This incident took place in Uzbekistan several years ago. At that time, up to 2 million children were forced to gather crops each fall. Among young laborers were even preschool children. Leaders under coercion. Bangladesh, Thailand, Egypt, Pakistan and China have the list of countries where children are exploited in the clothing industry. The average age of young workers is 10 to 14 years. Some of them have only 1 day off per week. Their monthly salary does not exceed $20. Unfortunately, the Pacific region is known as a part of the world where children's labor is quite a usual thing. Much depends on high density of population and low standard of living. Good examples are India and Bangladesh. They don't even record any information about their population. And the danger is that these children without documents can be exploited in unacceptable conditions. According to the UN, up to 78 million children in Asia and the Pacific need to work. In sub-Saharan Africa, their number reaches 59 million. In the Caribbean and Latin America, 30 million. In the Middle East and North Africa, more than 9 million. Passion for learning. Children who are forced to work from an early age do not even get school education. A busy work schedule deprives them of the possibility to study. As a result, the number of uneducated people all over the world is growing, despite the fact that acquiring knowledge and graduation from educational institutions was recognized as one of the main tools in the battle against economic crisis, unemployment and child labor exploitation. Of course, it is necessary to teach parents and warn them about the consequences of child labor for children themselves. Among them can be deterioration of health, low level of education and low self-esteem. Keeping parents informed about that can probably improve the situation. The problem still exists. 580,000 underage children are forced to work. They sell goods, collect garbage, wash cars with cold water, raise cattle and so on. 166,000 of them work during non-school hours. Others are unable to combine studies and work. Except knowledge harm, many of them suffer physically because lifting heavy weights, working in dusty and dirty places, and working at nights negatively affect health of young laborers. According to the labor code, adults should work 40 hours per week. The norms for people under the legal age are different. Youngsters aged 14 to 15 can work 24 hours per week, and young people aged from 16 to 17 no more than 36 hours. Children under 13 are prohibited to work, all the more so to the prejudice of learning at school. forced to shoot. During the first stage of the Syrian war, 15 to 17-year-old boys were forced to become soldiers. Soon, even 7-year-old children could be seen among recruits. Small kids turned into warriors from an early childhood. The first international conference on child labor took place on June 1, 1925 in Geneva. However, the implementation of decisions taken during the event began only in the post-war period. 1949, Paris. The Congress of the Women's International Democratic Federation prioritized the issues of protecting children's health and well-being of the future generation. Participants of the event swore to preserve peace on Earth. It was also when the International Children's Day was established. This day reminds the world community about its duty to respect the right to life, freedom of expression, education, free time and leisure of the younger generation. How the exploitation of child labor throughout the world can be stopped, and who defends children in Kazakhstan. To prevent any form of child exploitation. This is the principal requirement of the conventions of the International Labour Organization. The association advocates for protecting the rights of children and preventing them from forced labor, which can be dangerous for health and become the main reason of illiteracy. The document also calls on governments to establish minimum working age, labor conditions and working hours for young people under 18. Uzbekistan takes control of child labor exploitation. Last fall, the International Labour Organization monitored the situation in the country. No violations related to child labor were revealed. Along with that, local activists expanded the scope of their work. They gathered signatures from people who gave their consent for voluntary participation in harvesting of cotton. The domestic national university also did not stand still and sent third and fourth year students to the fields. The contact has been established. Efforts of international organizations and some states in solving issues of child labor have yielded positive results. Thus, in India, the number of underage workers over the last 10 years reduced by 64%. Along with that, the law was tightened, which prohibits employing children as sellers of food products and household servants. In addition, it became illegal to involve children in work in cafes, restaurants, hotels, health centers and entertainment parks. The Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh encouraged citizens of his country to support the efforts of the government, which tries to put an end to child labor. Lawbreakers can face up to 2 years of imprisonment. The national priority in Kazakhstan is to ensure happy and safe childhood. The adoption and implementation of the UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child is another evidence of that. The Convention on the Rights of the Child was ratified in Kazakhstan more than 20 years ago. This is one of the first documents adopted by independent Kazakhstan. The convention determines the basic rights of children and the responsibility of those involved in the protection of children. The convention contains articles about children's labor. In particular, one of the articles prohibits the worst forms of child labor exploitation. It is concerned with labor which impedes normal and harmonious development, education and physical development of children. All rights protected. This year, the Institute for Children's Rights Ombudsman was established in Kazakhstan. Its objective is to assess the situation of children, analyze laws, and be accessible for all citizens of Kazakhstan under 18. This practice is also used by 100 countries around the world. Various events were carried out and a lot of projects on the child's rights were implemented in Kazakhstan by the Institute for Children's Rights Ombudsman and UNICEF over a long period of time since the establishment of the Ombudsman in the country. Among the raised questions were the eradication of violations at schools, boarding schools, in families and in urban environment, as well as about children's vulnerability towards exploitation, in particular labor exploitation and human trafficking. The Institute for Children's Rights Ombudsman is going to create a comfortable and friendly environment for minors jointly with the government and social structures of Kazakhstan. We shall intensify our efforts to support families, detect vulnerable groups of children, prevent suicides among young people, increase the number of entertaining events and distribute relevant information in the mass media. In addition, we shall deal with the problem of the worst forms of child labor. Thus, in 2011, the International Labour Organization and International Programme on the Elimination of Child Labor assessed the situation in Kazakhstan concerning child labor exploitation in the agricultural sector. Almost all the ministries of Kazakhstan protect children against exploitation. After all, if a violation occurred, it would be considered in accordance with children's rights laws and articles of labor and criminal codes. The labor law of Kazakhstan and the law on the rights of the child prohibit the worst forms of child labor. Children are protected against any form of exploitation. The criminal code provides for liability for exploitation of minors. Along with that, the government of Kazakhstan has developed an interdepartmental plan with the participation of a number of ministries: the Ministry of Education and Science, Ministry of Public Health, Ministry of Culture, as well as prosecution authorities. It focuses on the implementation of the norms of the International Labour Organization's Convention on Elimination of the Worst Forms of Child Labor. Private organizations also deal with the problem of child rights protection together with the state authorities. A free 24-hour hotline for children and young people has been established. Calls are received from all parts of Kazakhstan. There were cases when children were forced to work in the fields during school hours. But where do things stand in the country in terms of child labor? Layla Akhmetova, a journalist, political scientist and social activist, decided to find an answer to this question. Jointly with government agencies and international organizations, she carried out a social research throughout the country. The questionnaire included such questions as what is child labor and what are the worst forms of child labor. The worst forms of child labor are when children work more than 4 hours per day and when children work in evenings or at night time. Currently, you can see that there are no such cases in Kazakhstan. Layla also advocates for the rights of minors and observing conventions of the International Labour Organization. The woman also raises public awareness towards social matters related to children. 12 days against the worst forms of child labor were proclaimed for the first time in 2005. It means that we celebrate the International Children's Day on the 1st of June, and during next 12 days we arrange different concerts, buy ice cream to our children and tell them good words. Honorary distinction. Layla Akhmetova won international recognition in the form of a UNICEF medal for her books dedicated to child labor.